Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. My name is Tom Butwin, and today we are talking about 5 very interesting tricks that John Mayer is employing on his brand new solo acoustic tour. I had the pleasure of seeing a show very recently. I had not great seats. They were really high up in the bowl, but that allowed me to notice some really interesting things that he was doing that nobody's really talking about yet. So we're going to go through those right now. The first thing that I noticed John Mayer is doing during the seated set is he actually has what's called a porch board or stomp box. Now, this is not a stomp box for you guitar players where it's like a pedal or something like that. What it really is generally a piece of wood that has a sort of microphone or what we would call a pickup in it. And it allows him to tap his foot and recreate a bass drum type sound. It's very subtle, and if you're not elevated like I was, you're not going to see that he's actually tapping his foot on something that's making a percussive sound. Normally, John Mayer does this with his hand. He is doing it with his hand on the acoustic guitar. It's kind of like the John Mayer thing on acoustic guitar. But this footboard, porch board, whatever you want to call it, is actually adding a little bit more oomph to that backbeat that he's laying down a lot of times with his hand. It's really cool because it's subtle. It's not really noticeable, but it adds just a little bit to his solo performances. The second thing, and you may have actually noticed this, are organ pedals. Now, these are a shortened, smaller version of what you would normally find on like a Hammond B3 organ. Organists have what are called manuals. So you've got 2 keyboards, sometimes 3, 4 if you have a pipe organ, and then you've got basically giant keys that you can play with your feet. So John Mayer has taken a smaller electronic version of this on the road, and he can now create bass lines with his feet. Edge of Desire is a great song that he does this in. If you're looking for an example, especially towards the end of the song or where the guitar solo would normally be. He's playing guitar, he's singing, and at the same time he's playing a bass line with his foot. Now again, it's subtle. They're very smart because they want this to still sound like just John Mayer playing for you. They don't want it to be sort of like this giant production behind him audio-wise where you're thinking like, oh, he's probably playing to a backing track or something. No, he's doing all of this himself, and it's really, really impressive, and it's really cool, and I love that it was actually very subtle. And again, my vantage point allowed me to watch him doing this stuff with his feet, and I've never seen him do something like that before. It's really, really interesting. You know, normally the most we see him doing as a solo artist with his acoustic guitar is playing harmonica and singing and playing guitar at the same time, which is a big undertaking in and of itself. But this is a whole nother level. It's really cool. And if you've seen the show live, you probably noticed that at this moment, especially in Edge of Desire, things just seem to be a little bit more full and bigger sounding. And a lot of it has to do with these bass pedals that he's using. Now, the third trick is not such a trick. I mean, none of these are really tricks, but this one's pretty obvious. And we've all seen pictures of the absolutely incredible double neck custom Martin guitar that he's playing. This guitar is absolutely wild. You've seen people like Richie Sambora play double neck guitars before, Jimmy Page. We have not seen John Mayer do this yet. And it was really, really, really cool in that first show. I wasn't at the first show, but of course we're all waiting patiently on the internet to see photos and videos. And you see this double neck, amazing piece of engineering and craftsmanship from Martin come out. And for those of you who are not guitar players, the top neck actually has 12 strings. The lower neck has 6 strings. So this gives him basically 2 different instruments that he can access at the same time. You'll see him switch back and forth between these 2 in the middle of songs, and it provides him with just a wider palette of sounds, which becomes really important when you're just one person playing for 2.5 hours. Now, could John Mayer go out with his standard 6-string guitar and just entertain an entire arena of 20,000 people with nothing else? Absolutely, he could definitely do that. But he's a very creative person. We've seen him do very interesting solo things before, and this is just the next step in that. Martin, I don't know if they made this specifically for this tour. My guess is it probably already existed because there wasn't a lot of time between when he decided to do the tour and actually that first show. But it's a beautiful instrument. It's very unique. Really, really something to behold when you see it in pictures. The fourth trick we have actually seen John Mayer use before. It's not anything new, and lots of people use this. It's what's called a looper. So you may notice at certain points in the show, John Mayer will either be sitting or standing and hit a button, play something, and hit a button again, and the thing that he just played will continue playing or looping in the background as he then switches to another guitar part. A lot of times it'd be a guitar solo. This is a really cool thing that a lot of people do. Ed Sheeran does it in a really magnificent, huge way where he builds up soundscapes from the ground up, and it takes him like 10 minutes to get all the parts going and everything. But you know, the typical way to do this as a guitar player is to provide yourself a backing track that you actually create live, and then you play a solo over top of it. Now, something that's really, really interesting in the John Mayer solo show is that he's doing the song Changing on the piano. And at the end of Changing, you know this is a moment with the band that you're just getting ready for this John Mayer solo. It's epic every time they do this. So the first time he did it, everyone was wondering, what's he going to do? How is he going to pull this off with the piano? I see his Silver Sky sitting there right there next to him, which is an electric guitar. Well, what he did was, and what he does during every show now, is he loops the end portion of the piano part. Instead of looping the guitar, you could also loop a piano. You could loop anything, really. He loops it, so he plays it, records it, and then hits play, and it basically just keeps going over and over and over again. He grabs his electric guitar and plays an incredible, wild solo over those piano chords that are playing. This is really the only point in the solo show that we get a quintessential John Mayer electric solo. It's a high point for sure. If you have not been to a show yet, when you go, you're going to see it. You're going to hear it. It's going to be amazing. If you have been there, you know it's an absolutely, for lack of a better term, electric moment in the show. And it all centers around this thing called a looper. Lastly, this is perhaps the most surprising for me thing that John Mayer has incorporated on this tour. And it's also very tough to hear sometimes, especially in the arena. But these are vocal effects that he's controlling with what appears to be some type of a expression or volume pedal. So again, if you are on the floor or the lower bowl, you probably can't see this when he's doing it during the standing portion of the show. But he'll sing a line, and then you'll see him kind of reach up with his right foot and rock this pedal forward. And what I think is happening here is that his vocal microphone is connected to a pedal on the floor that is also connected to this expression pedal. An expression pedal means you can control an effect or some type of crazy sound that you're adding to your voice or guitar with your foot. And generally, if you push the pedal forward like you're in a car, you're asking for more of whatever you have programmed to that pedal. So a lot of times he'll sing something and then he wants that thing to carry over while he stops singing and starts singing something else. That's very difficult to do, almost impossible if you're just one person. But if you sing something, hit the pedal, and then that thing extends just a little bit longer than it would normally, you get these interesting overlapping vocal lines that are only possible normally with incredible backing vocalists or in a studio setting where you can overdub on top of yourself with your own voice. But live, solo, this is one of the only ways to really do this. It's really interesting. I was totally caught off guard by it. But again, it's very subtle. It's not over the top. When you're listening to him play, it's not going to be like, oh, wow, I hear two of John Mayer. It's very subtle. It's very subtle. It's really cool. It's one of those things that if he were to put out a live album and you could hear the multi-track recording that has been mixed in a studio with headphones or on really nice speakers as opposed to being in a giant arena or watching an Instagram clip that was filmed with an iPhone, you'll probably be able to hear this much more clearly. But it's happening. It's really interesting. It's very cool. I'm curious to see as the solo tour progresses if he uses it more. There's very few songs that he uses it on, but when he does, it's actually a really interesting effect. This tour has been absolutely incredible. When somebody decides they're going to go out and play arenas by themselves, it's pretty incredible. And the production is cool. They have a Really interesting screen that moves up and down, some very cool lighting, but it's nothing like other people who have done solo shows in arenas. I mean, you see this with comedians sometimes. They do in the round type things. They have massive screens, and even Ed Sheeran. I mean, Ed Sheeran plays stadiums by himself, but he has a stage in the center of these stadiums that is akin to what U2 would use in a stadium. And it's just him, and he's running around. It's very interesting. There's nobody who does anything like that except for him. But for just a solo singer-songwriter to go out and not play theaters, not even play small amphitheaters, he's playing arenas. That's really interesting. And I think that's where some of these tricks, as I'm calling them, come in. He knows, like, hey, I'm one person. Yeah, I could do this, and I've done it where I just play in an arena and it's just me and my guitar and nothing else. It's an opportunity, though, for him to start to expand a little bit. Like I said before, we've actually seen him do some very interesting, smaller setting solo stuff where he had his MPC and he was playing some triggered things. He was playing a lot more electric guitar. He was playing over backing tracks that he had programmed into this unit that you would see actually look like kind of in like a pinball enclosure on stage. That was really interesting. I wondered if he was going to do that for this tour, but the cool thing is he totally scrapped that. He started from scratch and has developed this new kind of 3-station approach to playing: seated, standing, piano. It's really cool. It's really interesting. And these 5 tricks just add to the magic.